Hey, what's going on? This is Sports Truth. I'm your favorite host in the entire world, Jordan Harris. So, you might have heard that there's a new format for the college football playoffs. Some of y'all might have watched a video or two, or maybe you just read a quick article trying to find out how exactly is this selection criteria, like how does it all work out? So, I'm making this video just so I can explain directly to you how exactly this whole selection process works. All right. I've made this super simple. By the time you finish this video, you should be an expert and should be able to explain to other people how this whole process works. Okay? So let's go ahead and get right into it. Once again, this is 12-team college football playoffs explained. You might have heard something about the 5+7 college football playoffs. I kept seeing 5+7 everywhere, and I'm like, what does that even mean? So to explain that, 5+7, the 5 is the conference champions who get automatic bids that get straight into the playoffs, okay? Once again, the 5 conference champions who get automatically put into the college football playoff. That's the 5. That's what the 5 stands for. Out of that 5, the 4 highest ranked teams, the 4 highest ranked conference champions, they get a bye week in the playoffs, in the bracket, okay? So that's the 5 section. We've talked about that. Now let's talk about what the 7 is, 5+7. So the 7 would be the remaining, there's 5 teams that go to the 12-team playoff. There's 7 more teams left, obviously. 5+7 equals 12. So the other 7, those are at-large bids that get into the playoffs. And I'll explain a little bit more what that means as we get into the video. All right? So a lot of people, when they hear about 5 conference championships or 5 conference champions getting into the playoffs, the first thing that they think, and the first thing that I read on Twitter a few different places, which was wrong, was people saying that there's 4 in the Power 4, right? There's 4 conference champions in the Power 4. That's the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC. So people are out there saying that the 4 champions from those conferences will automatically get in, and then they'll take 1 conference champion from the group of 5 over here in these conferences. So the American, the MAC, the Mountain West, those conferences, they're saying only 1 team will get in from those conferences. But that is not correct. That's not how it works. The way that it's actually written is there's going to be 9 conference champions, okay? So there's 4 here plus 5 over there. That's 9 total conference champions. The 5 top rated of those 9 will go to the playoffs. So if there's a super down year for one of these conferences over here, if there's a really down year where the champion ends up with, I don't know how this could possibly be, but if the champion ends up with 3 losses, let's say, from the Big 12, if the Big 12 champion has 3 losses and they're just way down in the overall rankings, but then you have somebody from the American go undefeated, and then you've got somebody from the Mountain West go undefeated. Those 2 teams would most likely end up going and representing those 5 that get the automatic bid, and the Big 12 champion would end up sitting out that year. So that's how it works. I've put together a real quick example of how this may work. Okay, so over here, and I know this is a lot of stuff on the screen here, but I can explain it to you to make perfect sense. So over on the left over here, this is just what I assume the end of the year rankings could look like. This is a major assumption because some of these teams you're like, there's no way they're going to be ranked that high. But this is the top 8 teams at the end of the year, at the end of the season right here. And then on that side, I'm explaining what the playoff rankings would end up being in the bracket, okay? So let's start at the end of the season. We have Michigan up there at the top. I have them ranked number 1 to end the season, to end the 2024-2025 regular season. And let's say Michigan won the Big Ten championship. If you see an asterisk next to the name, that means that they won their conference championship, okay? So Michigan, they got all the way to the championship game, won the Big Ten championship. Ohio State, they ended up losing 1 time throughout the year, and let's just say that they lost to Michigan. That was their only loss. They ended up finishing the season number 2 overall. They finished the season number 2 overall, but they didn't win the Big Ten championship because Michigan did. Okay? Miami, they won the ACC championship. Hurricanes, they'll probably do that this year, by the way. Okay? Alabama, they ended up going undefeated and they won the SEC championship. Georgia, they lost one game all year. They lost to Alabama. These are all assumptions, of course, but let's say they're in the SEC and they lost one game, and that was to Alabama. So now they're ranked number 5 to end the season. And then we've got Liberty, who was undefeated, and they won their Conference USA championship. Conference USA championship. And then we've got San Diego State, who was undefeated, and they won their Mountain West Conference championship. Then K-State down here, they lost 3 games, but they somehow figured out a way to win the Big 12 championship. Okay? So now that is the end of season rankings. K-State ends up number 8, San Diego State number 7. You see it listed over here. Now, how would these final standings project to the playoff rankings inside of the bracket? Okay? Like I mentioned earlier, the top 4 teams, the top 4 conference champions, they get a bye week. So let's see who that would be, okay? So Michigan ended up winning the Big Ten, and they were the number 1 overall ranked team. So they would be the number 1 playoff ranked team, number 1 overall. Then you skip over Ohio State because Ohio State did not win their conference championship. You go down to the second conference champion, which is Alabama. Even though they're number 3 overall, they would be the second highest ranked conference champion. So they would be number 2 in the playoff rankings. And then you go down and find out who the third conference champion ranked is. That's Alabama. They'll be number 3. Now this is where it gets somewhat tricky. You look at Liberty. So you have, after Alabama, you've got Georgia. Georgia's ranked number 5 overall, but Liberty won their conference championship. So they would actually jump over Georgia in the playoff rankings, and they would be number 4 overall. And since Liberty, Alabama, Miami, and Michigan are the top 4 ranked conference champions, they would get a bye week in the playoffs, okay? Then you got San Diego State. They are the next team that's a conference champion in the overall rankings, so they would go to number 5 in the playoffs, okay? And then, so you got the top 5. You got the top 5 conference champions, 1 through 5 here. Then what you do from there is you go from remember I told you it's 5 plus 7. So now you're going to the 7 at-large bids. And the way you find those 7 at-large bids is you just go to the very top and see who was ranked the highest, and then you fill in the gaps from there. So number 2 was Ohio State. They didn't win their championship, their conference championship, but they are the highest ranked team that's not a conference champion out of the top 5. So they move to 6. And then Georgia would be the next team that's not a conference champion. They would go to 7. Then you go to Ohio State, and then you go to K-State, and you just fill in from there. So, again, you go 5, which is your 5 highest-ranked conference champions, and those 5 automatically go in. After those 5, you start focusing on the 7 at-large teams. That's the 7 teams who didn't win their conference championship. Maybe they did win their conference championship, but they're not in that top 5 conference champions. We'll just go on whoever was the next 7 highest ranked teams after those 5 got in. Hoping that makes sense, because it can get confusing, can get a little convoluted, but I want to make sure that I explained. If I can understand it this way, I figured if I can explain the way that I understand it, it would probably make sense to you. So let me know what you think about that. Please do like the video. Subscribe to the channel. We are definitely racing to grow this channel as quickly as we possibly can, to bring as much, and we'll bring as much content to you as we possibly can, obviously. Also, subscribe to the channel. That helps us grow. Let me know your comments. Do you think this whole playoff ranking system makes sense? Do you think they made it a little too confusing? Just to give you my thoughts on it, I think this is definitely heading towards the right direction. If this isn't the right answer, it's definitely a huge step in the right direction. The reason why I believe that is because it takes so much of the subjectivity out of it. and it brings in more of it gets us closer to the mindset of if you win, you're automatically in. It's closer to that process. Kind of like what we see in college basketball when they're picking the the tournament at the end of the year, the March Madness. There's a lot of teams who, they get left out and they're upset about that. But they have it broken down to where if you win your conference championship, you are automatically in. So it's really hard to complain about not getting into the tournament because it's up to you. Like, win your conference championship and you go into the tournament. And that's basically what this thing is boiling down to. I like the fact that there's going to be less subjectivity. There's going to be less people complaining about SEC bias and Big Ten bias and all that kind of stuff. If you are one of these teams from the Big 12, if you're one of those teams from the ACC who continuously gets overlooked and not get into the playoffs, the one thing you can do is win your conference championship. If you win that, you're automatically going to get in. Just about. You'll almost automatically get in unless one of those crazy scenarios that I put up here happens. But yeah, man, I think it's a huge step in the right direction. I do think they'll end up doing 16 teams within the next few years because I think they've only put this process in for the next 2 years. So I think after those two, they might renew it for 2 more years. And then I think after that, we'll go to 16 teams. That's my thought. But yeah, that's all that I got for you today. I appreciate you being here. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I truly appreciate that. So take care. God bless. Peace.